She didn't stand out just an old woman at the grocery store checkout line buying a loaf of bread and a bouquet of small white flowers. The kind of customer you glance at once, then forget, until the teenager behind her snorted, seeing the faded military patch on her jacket, and said,
Nice jacket, Grandma. That from your husband's closet?
loud enough for half the store to hear. She paused, looked at him with tired eyes, but said nothing. He chuckled,
Stolen valor isn't a good look, you know.
another snicker from the cashier. The old woman's hand trembled for just a second as she counted out crumpled bills. No one defended her. No one knew her. So she just paid, took her change, and walked out as if the words didn't cut deep. What that teenager didn't know was the name on that patch still meant something. And less than an hour later, a handful of soldiers in uniform walked into that same store, silent and stone-faced, asking a single question.
Where is she?
Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin this story of quiet valor and overdue respect, tell me in the comments what city in the world you're watching from. And if you believe that the heroes who live among us deserve to be recognized, hit that subscribe button and join us in honoring them. It was 4:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in a small-town grocery, and the after-work rush had just begun. Lane 3's conveyor belt whirred steadily as the cashier, a bored college kid named Kevin, scanned items without looking up. In front of him, the old woman stood patiently. She wore an olive-drab field jacket frayed at the cuffs, the sort issued half a century ago. On her shoulder was a faded patch, an eagle's head against a shield, the emblem of the
101st Airborne.
The colors were washed out, threads worn, but it was still there. She had found that jacket in the back of her closet that morning and decided to wear it against the chill. It hung a bit loose on her now. Decades ago it had fit just right over a young soldier's frame. She placed her items on the belt carefully, bread, milk, eggs, and a small bouquet of white daisies. The young man behind her in line shifted from foot to foot. He was maybe 19, with earbuds dangling round his neck and impatience written in his slouched shoulders. She offered a polite nod to him when their eyes met briefly. He didn't nod back. The cashier mumbled the total, barely audible over the beep of the scanner. The old woman opened a worn leather coin purse as she counted out exact change. As she did, her sleeve pulled back slightly. Beneath it, on her inner wrist, was a thin, faded scar, and just above it, the edge of a tattoo peeking out. 2 small wings and a star. The parachutist badge. The cashier didn't notice, but the teenager did. That's when he scoffed loud enough for others to turn their heads.
Really? Airborne, huh?
He sneered, eyes on her wrist and jacket patch. His tone was mockery, thinly veiled as curiosity. Kevin paused, scanning, and looked up, suddenly interested in the brewing drama. The old woman slowly pulled her sleeve down, her cheeks flushing.
My brother had one of those patches.
The teen continued, voice dripping with sarcasm.
But he actually fought in Afghanistan. Where'd you get yours? An army surplus store?
He was smirking, and now the customer behind him, a middle-aged man in a sports jersey, gave a chuckle, emboldening the kid. "Yeah, so where'd you serve, Grandma?" The man snickered. For a moment, a flash of something crossed the old woman's eyes. Not anger exactly, but a deep hurt, mixed with a pride that hadn't been spoken of in years. She opened her mouth as if to say something, maybe to correct them, maybe to tell them that she had worn this patch in a place far from home long before that kid was even born. But then she closed it. A lifetime of knowing when to stay quiet overcame the brief spark. She simply handed her bills to the cashier. Kevin smirked, taking his time to count the change, as if she were the one inconveniencing him. Her hands shook just a little as she accepted the coins and stuffed her receipt into her pocket.
That's what I thought.
The teen muttered behind her.
People who actually earned those don't walk around bragging.
The venom in his tone hung in the air. She glanced at him once more, and in a calm, soft voice she said,
"You're right. They don't."
Then she picked up her grocery bag in one arm and the daisies in the other. For a split second, the teen looked confused, not sure if he'd been insulted or agreed with. Before he could decide, the old woman turned and walked away, each step measured and steady. The automatic doors whooshed open, and she disappeared into the dusk outside, without another word. In the silence that followed, the cashier shrugged and went back to scanning items. The teen snorted and stepped forward to pay for his energy drinks and chips, acting as if nothing significant had happened. Most of the onlookers turned back to their own business. Almost all of them, except one. 2 lanes over in lane 5, a young man in a faded hoodie had witnessed the whole exchange. His name was Ryan, an off-duty National Guard lieutenant who had stopped in for some groceries on his way home from drill. He knew that patch. He'd seen it on the shoulder of the sergeant who taught him land navigation, the man who always spoke with reverence about the heroes of Vietnam. Ryan also recognized the insignia that had peeked from the old woman's wrist. Basic parachutist. Wings, if he wasn't mistaken, something few women of her generation would have earned. He watched her leave, heart pounding with a mix of anger at the kid's disrespect and curiosity about the woman herself. Ryan abandoned his shopping basket on the shelf and hurried out after her, leaving his items behind. The parking lot was awash in the orange glow of a setting sun. He squinted, looking for her. For a moment, he worried she'd driven off. But then he saw her. She was at the far end of the lot, by a beat-up blue pickup truck. He jogged closer, keeping a respectful distance so as not to startle her. The old woman carefully placed her groceries on the passenger seat. As she did, Ryan noticed the truck had a license plate with a Purple Heart emblem on it and a small sticker on the window that read, "Vietnam Veteran." His breath caught in his throat. The pieces were all coming together. She closed the truck door and turned to find Ryan standing a few steps away. He was out of breath from the rush over, and now that he was face to face, he suddenly realized he had no idea what to say. She looked at him calmly, one eyebrow raised in question. Ryan straightened up, instinctively at attention, though he wore only jeans and a hoodie. "Ma'am," he said carefully,
I'm sorry to bother you. I saw what happened in there.
Her expression remained neutral, guarded. Up close, he could see the age lines on her face, the kind that come from years of worry and sun. But her eyes were sharp, a clear gray blue that seemed to pierce right through him.
"I'm okay."
She said after a moment, her voice gentle but firm.
"You didn't have to come out here."
Ryan swallowed.
With respect, ma'am, I think I did.
He nodded toward her jacket. 101st Airborne? He asked softly. She hesitated, then gave a single proud nod.
Long time ago.
She murmured. Ryan felt a slight chill.
Vietnam.
He ventured. Her eyes flickered with something memory, pain, pride, all at once.
68 to 71.
She said quietly. 3 years, he realized. 3 years in country, at a time when a year was more than enough to break most people.
Medic nurse.
He asked, noting the absence of any obvious rank insignia on the old jacket. For the first time, a hint of a smile touched the corner of her mouth.
Army Nurse Corps.
She replied.
Captain, by the time I came home.
Ryan exhaled slowly. That meant she was an officer, likely in charge of a field hospital unit or a surgical ward, and she had airborne wings, meaning she was jump qualified, maybe part of the 101st Support, or had gone through airborne training to be with the troops in the field. It was rare, nearly unheard of for women back then, except for a few pioneers. He suddenly realized he might be standing with one of them.
Those guys in there.
Ryan began, anger seeping into his voice.
They had no right.
The old woman, captain, veteran, whoever she truly was, shook her head lightly.
They're just kids.
She said.
They don't know any better.
She moved to step around to the driver's side. Ryan took a half step back, not wanting to crowd her.
At least let me carry those flowers for you,
he offered, noticing her hands were empty now. The bouquet lay on the seat inside. She paused, her hand on the door handle.
That's sweet of you,
she said.
But I've got them.
A beat of silence. Ryan felt like he should say or do something more, but he couldn't find the words. The old woman gave him a faint, understanding smile. Then she climbed into her truck, the engine rumbling to life, and drove off into the dusk. Ryan stood there in the parking lot long after her truck's taillights had faded. Around him, the sun slipped below the horizon, and the first hint of evening chill set in. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had just brushed against a living piece of history, and that it was up to him now to not let that history vanish unacknowledged. In his hand, he still held his phone. Instinctively, he had snapped a photo of the truck's license plate before she left, not for any official reason, but because part of him felt responsible now. He couldn't just let what happened go unanswered. That night, Ryan sat at his kitchen table, the groceries he'd never finished buying forgotten. He opened his laptop and began searching. He started broadly. Female 101st Airborne Nurse, Vietnam. 1969, field hospital attack, Silver Star, dozens of results, military history forums, scanned archives, fragments of old reports. It was like looking for a needle in a stack of needles. After an hour of digging through half-legible PDFs and yellowed newspaper clippings, he found something. A declassified Army after-action report from August 1969 near Tay Ninh, Vietnam. His eyes scanned the text, and a line stood out. Captain Katherine Ward, ANC, distinguished herself by exceptional valor when a field hospital came under enemy attack. Despite shrapnel wounds, Captain Ward evacuated 12 wounded personnel from a burning tent, shielded a young private with her own body, and refused to leave until all her patients were safe. Awarded Bronze Star with V device and Purple Heart. recommended for Silver Star, decision pending. Ryan leaned back, heart racing. The name on the report matched an earlier clue he'd found. Colonel Katherine M. Ward, retired, listed quietly on a nursing school's alumni page as a Vietnam veteran. Katherine Ward. This was her. It had to be. The dates lined up, and the story. It made his eyes sting, just reading it. She had been there, in one of the worst places at the worst times, and had done more than anyone could ask. He pictured the modest old woman in her frayed jacket, buying daisies and bread, getting mocked by a kid who had no idea that she once pulled bleeding soldiers through fire and smoke. The thought made him clench his fists. Ryan clicked open a social media app and typed out a quick post in a private military group he was part of. Careful not to reveal her full name publicly.
Saw an elderly lady in town today wearing a 101st patch. Got harassed by some kid for it. Turns out she's the real deal. Vietnam vet, Army nurse, decorated for valor. Thinking we should do something.
He attached the license plate photo and a snippet of the report, then hit send. The response was immediate. Messages from veterans and soldiers poured in, all echoing the same sentiment. Something had to be done. By midnight, a plan was set in motion. They would gather at dawn the next day at the Veterans Memorial Park. Dawn broke cool and golden over the town the next day. The Veterans Memorial Park was empty, save for rows of flags and a granite wall etched with names at 6:50 a.m. Ryan arrived, now in his dress uniform, boots polished, his lieutenant's bar gleaming on his shoulder. To his relief, people were already there. A small gathering of perhaps 15 men and women spanning generations. A few gray-haired veterans in old service caps and jackets, heavy with pins, alongside young active duty soldiers in crisp camouflage, and a couple in dress blues or greens. Among them, he spotted several of his guard unit buddies. They stood quietly, nodding to each newcomer. No one spoke much. They all knew why they were here. By 7 o'clock, the group had swelled larger. A pair of local police officers, both Marine vets, stood off to the side, their squad car lights off, there to pay respects quietly. Even a cluster of fresh-faced ROTC cadets from the community college had shown up in uniform, having heard the story through the grapevine. At 7:10, Ryan's heart quickened. He saw the familiar blue pickup truck pull slowly into a parking spot by the curb. It was her. Katherine Ward stepped out, looking perplexed at the number of vehicles in the otherwise empty park at this hour. She clutched the bouquet of daisies, now a day old but still white and bright, in one hand. She hesitated when she saw the uniforms and the quiet crowd, as if wondering if she'd stumbled onto an official ceremony she'd forgotten about. Ryan stepped forward from the assembly and approached her slowly, his face calm, but his pulse thudding in his ears. "Ma'am," he said, greeting her with a gentle voice. She recognized him after a second.
Lieutenant,
She nodded, eyes moving past him to the others gathered.
what's all this?
She asked warily. Before he could answer, another figure stepped up beside Ryan, a tall man in his late 60s wearing an old Army jacket with the same 101 Saint patch. He stood as straight as he could, a slight tremor in his posture, and raised a salute. His voice was thick with emotion.
We heard what happened.
He said quietly,
We're here to stand for you, like you stood for us.
Catherine's lips parted in astonishment.
For me?
She whispered. No one said a word. There was just the rustle of the morning breeze through the flags and the distant sound of traffic beyond the park. Catherine stood at the center of it, the focus of a respect she never asked for and never expected. The daisies in her hand quivered as she began to shake her head, overwhelmed.
You didn't have to.
She managed, her voice breaking. Ryan, still at attention beside her, said softly,
Ma'am?
"With your permission?" And then, in one fluid motion, he led the group in a slow, respectful salute toward her. Dozens of hands rose in perfect unison, an arc of honor encircling this quiet woman. Catherine's free hand flew to her mouth. She inhaled sharply, eyes filling with tears that began to streak down her cheeks. She had received salutes before, long ago in another life, but nothing like this. This was different. This was not about rank or protocol. This was gratitude. She straightened instinctively, old habits of military bearing coming back straight, chin up, despite the tears. And then she returned the salute. Her arm lifted, fingers pressed to her brow in the crisp, precise motion she had taught to countless young nurses decades ago. It was steady as a rock. The group held the salute for what felt like a timeless moment. Sunrise light caught the tear tracks on many faces, not just hers. In that silence, words would only cheapen the feeling. They all knew why they were there. Finally, Ryan dropped his hand, and the others followed. Catherine lowered hers, last of all. A few quiet sniffles were heard in the ranks, but still no one spoke. They didn't need to. The tall, older veteran who had saluted first stepped forward again and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small shadow box frame containing a medal, a bronze star with the V for valor. It was the very medal Catherine had earned that August day in 1969. He held it out to her gently.
I think you dropped this, Captain,
he said, using her old rank. Catherine looked at the medal, recognizing it instantly, and let out a soft, broken laugh that was half a sob.
I didn't lose that,
she said.
I donated it to the Legion Hall years ago.
The man nodded, smiling softly. And we decided it was time to give it back. With trembling hands, Catherine accepted the framed medal. Her reflection mingled with its bronze shine in the morning light. She looked around at the faces, young soldiers who weren't even born when she went to war, and older comrades who knew too well what that burden felt like. The teenager's cruel words from the day before were all but erased now by the silent honor surrounding her. One of the ROTC cadets, barely 20, and eyes red from holding back tears, stepped forward hesitantly. He held out a small rectangular patch, clearly handmade. It was an old one, '01 airborne patch, weathered around the edges, and below it was stitched a single word: respect. The cadet must have made it overnight as a tribute. He offered it with both hands.
Mom,
He said, voice wavering.
we made this for you.
She accepted the patch, running her thumb over the word.
Respect.
She echoed under her breath. Her shoulders quaked once as she contained a sob. Then, slowly, Katherine Ward, who had spent a lifetime avoiding the spotlight, turned to face the assembled group fully. She looked at each of them, trying to convey her gratitude without words. Her eyes met Ryan's at the end, and she gave him a nod that spoke volumes. He knew in that moment that following her out of the store and lighting a signal for others had been the right thing to do. The soldiers and veterans gently parted to form a path toward the memorial wall. At some unspoken signal, Catherine stepped forward, and together they walked with her toward the granite monument etched with the names of the fallen. She knelt down and softly laid her bouquet of daisies at the base. The petals fluttered in the breeze. Behind her, as one, the men and women in uniform came to attention again and offered a final silent salute, not just to her, but to all the names on that wall and to everything she and her generation had sacrificed. Catherine reached out and touched the wall, her fingers brushing over a particular name. Maybe a friend, maybe one of those she couldn't save. A single tear fell onto the stone, catching a ray of sunlight. After a long moment, she rose, helped gently by two of the veterans at her sides. She turned to find herself encircled by quiet gratitude. The teenager's cruel comments from the day before were now just a memory, wiped away by this overwhelming show of respect. She cleared her throat, finding her voice one last time, hoarse but clear.
Thank you.
She said softly, looking around at all of them.
All of you.
And that was all. Nothing more needed saying. One by one people approached her, not in a rush, not crowding, but slowly and respectfully. A young female soldier, barely out of training, quietly embraced her, whispering,
Ma'am, we stand on your shoulders.
An older Marine with a silver beard simply shook her hand with both of his, eyes wet, then moved on without a word. The cadets hovered in the back, standing respectfully at attention, content just to witness the moment. The crowd began to disperse as quietly as it had gathered, duty and morning light calling them to the rest of their day. But something had fundamentally changed in that dawn hush. A woman who had walked alone for so many years, feeling like no one cared, discovered that people remember, that people do care when given the chance. Even the teenager who had mocked her eventually found her and apologized. She listened kindly and told him,
Not all heroes look the way you expect.
leaving him humbled and red-faced. The grocery store quietly made its amends too. The manager set up a small display by the exit with an American flag pin and a sign saying, "Thank you to all who served." The next time she came in, he personally carried her groceries to her car. As for Catherine, life went on. She still preferred her quiet, humble routine. But now, when she walked through town, people who'd never noticed before offered a nod or a helping hand. Small gestures of respect from a community that finally knew her story. The next morning, Catherine pinned that 101st Airborne patch with the word respect onto the breast pocket of her old jacket. It felt heavier than it looked, heavy with meaning, with gratitude. She wore it as she took her usual walk to the park. And as she walked, people noticed. Not the patch itself, perhaps, but the dignity in the way she carried it. Because, in the end, respect isn't about who shouts the loudest. It's about who stands quietly, doing what's right even when no one's watching, and who stands up when they see someone deserving of honor being overlooked. Katherine Ward never sought recognition, but when it found her, she accepted it with the same grace and humility with which she had once saved lives on a distant battlefield. So now I ask you, have you ever met someone like her? Someone who lived a life of service and never asked for anything in return. Someone who walked humbly among us, carrying untold stories of courage. Share their story in the comments. Let's make sure their light isn't hidden any longer. And if this story touched your heart, please share it and subscribe to the Human Stories. Because the quiet heroes around us deserve to be seen, remembered, and honored. Sometimes all it takes is a second look and the courage to say, "You matter," to change someone's world. Until next time, remember, the real heroes might be standing right next to you in the checkout line, wearing a faded jacket and a humble smile,